Hi everyone. Here's the overview video for Chapter 4. There's a lot of good topics for Unit 4. There are a lot of good topics in Chapter 7, 8, and 9. I decided to explore homework in a little more depth because it's something that I think has been around for a long time, but is still rather controversial as far as the benefits of homework. I also am interested in homework because of some comments that my son recently made. He is a junior in college at K-State. He's studying computer engineering, and he still does homework, and he calls his assignments homework. And that was surprising to me. That's not a term that I actually even use in my own college teaching. So I asked him to tell me a little bit about what he means by homework, and he says that professors assign problems for students to solve. Some of them are math, the physics kinds of problems that are not necessarily read and graded by the teacher every time students do those problems. So the teacher will assign problems every class session, but may only look at a third of the problems. It's kind of like a pop quiz, only it's done through homework. And so that threat of that teacher reviewing those problems is enough to get my son to do the homework, even though it doesn't get graded, which again is kind of a shocking thing for me. So my discussions with him about homework in his time as a student kind of made me wonder. Then again, as I was reading chapter 7, thinking about our content about homework and how that could apply to the elementary and middle school, high school classrooms. So I wanted to learn more. I went to the Center for Public Education's website and did a little more exploring. While I was there, I found 3 myths. So the first myth is homework increases academic achievement. Now, it seems like it would increase academic achievement. You know, you're getting more practice at home, so you're going to learn the material better. But what research has found is that there's a typing mistake on my slide. The link between homework and achievement is not a direct link, and sometimes it contradicts each other. So sometimes in research, when we have students doing homework, it doesn't show up in their academic achievement, and sometimes when they don't do homework, their academic achievement improves. So it's really hard to glean any kind of guidance from research as far as whether homework helps students perform better in the classroom. Here's one reason that this is a challenging subject for researchers. Think about this for a minute. So if you're trying to, quote, prove that homework is beneficial to students academically, here's what you have to do. You have to set up an experiment where you have a control group that doesn't do any homework, and you have an experimental group that does do homework, and you compare the achievement of the two. Okay, sounds simple enough, but let's think through this a little bit more. For the experimental group, all the students in that group would have to do homework that's related to the same content, the same kind of homework. They would have to all be in a similar setting. They would all have to spend a similar amount of time. They would all have to receive a similar level of help on their homework. Well, then it's not really homework, is it, if you're trying to control all of those things? At the same time, the students in the control group could not do any homework. They should be not participating in that in order to be able to make a comparison between the two groups. Now, this gets even more complicated because if what you're looking for is increased academic achievement, there's lots of other ways for kids to learn more besides homework. So in this experiment, you would have to make sure that all the kids learned the same thing, the same amount of content, within the same kind of setting, even when it's out of school or in school. Well, that's nearly impossible to control because you have teachers who teach content in different ways. And when kids are out of school, they are reading books, they're watching television shows or videos, they're going on trips with their family, they're learning about content in other ways. You cannot control all the ways that kids are going to learn about content. So it's nearly impossible to create a scientifically replicable experiment that proves homework improves academics, especially one that lasts more than just a short time. And then to really have solid proof, we would need several studies that prove this. Well, I'm wondering if we're ever really going to have a definitive answer about the value of homework in improving students' academics because it is such a difficult thing to, quote, prove. Um, all right, myth number 2. In this myth, it says without excessive homework, students' test scores will not be internationally competitive. Okay, so if we dig a little bit deeper, we see that information from international assessment shows little relationship between the amount of homework students do and test scores. In fact, in Japan and Finland, students are assigned less homework, but they outperform US students on tests many, many times. So there is not a direct link between the amount of homework and how students will perform on standardized tests. Now, we'll have people in the public who will think, well, to improve performance, we need kids to work harder, and homework is an aspect of that. And that's not necessarily to say that kids shouldn't do homework, but if your goal is to see an increase in test scores, homework is not going to necessarily bring about that increase. Another interesting thing is that one of the research studies showed that if students are practicing math, then homework seems to have a higher correlation to how they'll do on a standardized test than if they're practicing reading. And I thought that was really interesting, especially with my background in teaching reading. And I'm wondering if that has anything to do with the fact that math does have some memorization in those math facts, and being able to access those quickly can help you with your accuracy and your speed in math. And so that type of learning may be something that homework is beneficial for, but when it comes to reading, it's more of a holistic brain skill in that students are applying phonics knowledge, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, all at the same time. And so it makes me wonder what kinds of out of school reading activities are beneficial. And I don't know what reading homework exactly entails. Is it sustained silent reading? Is it phonics worksheets? It wasn't really clear in that study. So I don't want to just make a blanket statement that all reading homework is not beneficial. Because we do know that practicing oral reading is beneficial for students, and more exposure to words can increase their vocabulary. So there's kind of a quandary there that makes me want to know a bit more. Okay, here's myth number 3. Those who question homework want to weaken curriculum and pander to students' laziness. I thought that was an interesting way to describe it, making that assumption that students are lazy. Some students are, not all students. And not doing homework, does that somehow weaken the curriculum? Are we lowering our standards of what we expect from students if we don't expect them to practice outside of school? The researchers say homework critics rarely question the work assigned, but rather the fact that work is so often performed at home without adult supervision to aid in the learning process. So it isn't necessarily that critics are saying the work that students are doing isn't meaningful, although in some cases homework is not meaningful practice, but in other cases it is. But they're saying that students are expected to do this work without anybody there to guide them. And that's definitely a challenge that we face with homework, because uh, we don't want students to practice doing something incorrectly. And without that guidance, they run the risk of doing that. And we know that many families struggle with finding time to do homework outside of school for lots of different reasons, some valid, some we may wonder about. So it's difficult to get that consistency. And so many teachers will just say, well, I'm not going to give homework because I know my students won't do it, or they won't get the help they need to do it. And so then it's not beneficial. And I don't know if that's the right answer either. In fact, I really don't know what the right answer is when it comes to homework. These are the 3 things that our book told us that we know from research about homework. And one is that it's better for older students than younger students. And I think this would make logical sense because as students become more independent, they need less guidance with their homework. Number two is that homework should focus on practice needed for learning new skills, kind of like I described with my son. The teacher teaches a concept in the course, the students do the practice problems to help cement their knowledge of that concept. Now, for young children, homework may or may not do that. And so trying to gear homework to that practicing of learning new skills, I think would be beneficial. And then the third thing that we learned is that the teacher must give a purpose for homework. It shouldn't be busy work or something that just fills time for kids outside of school. It should definitely have a purpose, and that links back to that number two of learning new skills. So if we keep those three things in mind, I think those are good guideposts for helping teachers to make decisions about homework. If you want to know more or you want to see the reading that I did, the website is the centerforpubliceducation.org. And hopefully this little blurb gets you thinking a bit more about the value of homework in your role as a teacher.